For those who crave more than just reading headlines in their social media feeds.
People need to wake up.
Today's News Talk, TNT.
Autonomous penguins, says Holly. Like the sound of that, actually. Going on to a few more here. How can a professional yacht crew not know of such an unusual weather situation and take action? All asleep at 5 a.m., asks Holly. I don't think so. But hey, that must be climate change then. Holly, funny you should say that. The state-sponsored BBC has already alluded to the fact that climate change may have been responsible for the sinking of this boat. Oh, for goodness sake. Observer says it was clear from the off that this was a killing spree. Donna, got to go listening in, though, says Holly. Yes, you can listen as you go around. Spyro Gyro asks a question that's crossed my mind. Has anybody checked to see if there was actually a tornado, which is interesting. Right, now, let's get into this. We're not going to solve the mystery of the double death, but it's important we talk about how it may be solved. None better to discuss this with me than Christian Lander, who represents the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena, an organization I have enormous respect for. Christian, thanks for joining us here on TNT, wearing your ASSAP hat today, Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. Tell us, what does ASSAP do?
So ASSAP is a scientific and orientated charity that discusses and investigates cases of anomalous phenomena. So it could be strange encounters, could be probability, could be those who are reporting strange occurrences that might need to be investigated. And from that, using an ideally scientific method, but sometimes some novel approaches to matters that some people might want to have some matters explained with. So it is really interesting to actually be here wearing a different hat today, because I'm Christian Lander today. I'm a member of ASSAP. So
it's a great organization. I'm going to rejoin it. By the way, I'll tell to all our viewers, go to ASSAP. It is ASSAP, not ASAP, of course. My second grammatical error of the day. It's fascinating. And the magazine is brilliant, not just because I've occasionally been published in it myself, but it's fascinating. Now, I doubt we're going to solve the mystery of the deaths of Chamberlain and Lynch in this conversation. But it's so odd. I thought that there was no better organization than yourselves to talk, maybe you do know some information about that, but talk about how we should go about objectively judging and concluding what happens when apparently enormously unlikely occurrences like this take place.
I mean, the one factor you have to consider is it's a matter of coincidence, right? There is a matter of synchronicity with these cases. And we are aware, of course, that these two individuals were connected. There was a large multi-billion dollar lawsuit against them, filed by HP, Hewlett-Packard, of course. That has to be considered. And there is a matter of going, how did these two people miraculously die within the same 48-hour period? That is unfortunate. But of course, the human body has this problem. We mentally have an issue. That is, we like to recognize patterns. We like to make connections where perhaps there isn't none. We have two situations here that are, they're 1,500 miles apart. And so you have the situation where, of course, the yacht that, according to the studies, where it was actually sitting quite low in the water. It was quite heavily ballasted at one end. It was sat quite low, tipped to one end, as a report I saw yesterday from one of the observers. A ship that was actually anchored nearby says it was too low in the water. It had its port windows open, so basically the porthole. So as water would have washed in, it would have started to flood the cabins at the back. That clearly is a difficult issue to how to reconcile. That's why the ship went down so quick, why the super yacht went down in the manner that it did. But thankfully, of course, there was ships nearby that were anchored nearby that were able to give support to them. People who 15 were found to be straight away from the water. And the 6 other individuals were recovered last night, as I read at about 6:30 last night, as they were on the rescue stations. So the human body, we like to recognize patterns, we like to make these connections when perhaps there is none. Statistically, of course, you have to look at, well, one happened in the Mediterranean, one happened in the UK, one's a guy running out there. He has been obviously hit by a car. That's an unfortunate situation. Would we like to believe that these events are connected? Potentially, yes. We obviously come from an audience that is very much aware that these matters can happen. There is clearly certain, we'd hate to use the word powers that be, that perhaps aren't happy with the results of these things, and we would like to ascribe that they are the culprit, that they are the ones who caused this to happen. Clearly not the case. Clearly we've got a weather front that happened in the Mediterranean with that. It was basically a pop-up storm, as they called it. I saw reports from the weather area in that particular zone. We also have, of course, over the last 3 or 4 years, there's lots of there is a heat transfer that's happening coming off the Sahara. So you have to take into account that these weather fronts, these weather patterns that are changing in there. The what do they call it? There's an isobar that kind of rolls over the Mediterranean. It's actually come down by 2 degrees in that particular area.
Isotherm.
So there's a weather front that's changed in that particular region. So while we would like to ascribe somehow the Mother Nature is perhaps taking its revenge on these terrible bankers that we don't like very much, I do believe that the situations are very much a separate matter. With the case of the Steve Chamberlain, of course, who was hit by the car, I was looking at the statistics for the data when it comes to Break the UK Safety, which is one of the motor insurance bureaus in the UK. It says that there's 16,272 cases of hit and runs in the UK, and cases where vehicles will hit individuals. So there's a high statistical probability. Okay, we've got 72 million people in the UK, 16,000 have hit by cars every year. So what's the statistical probability measured against a storm happening in the Mediterranean? Actually, it's quite high. These things do happen. It just happens to be that they are connected to a same case that we, Hewlett Packard, of course, are quite happy that they got dismissed about.
That's impressive. And also, not necessarily what I would have expected from ASSAP. Many people would assume that you're conspiracy theorists and you want to see strange UFO-like connections between these events where an alien organization had a flying saucer that caused a tornado and then caused the car to hit Chamberlain. But actually, you're saying we need to be cautious when we analyze these things. Is there a temptation, because of the way that we think, like you said at the beginning, is there a temptation for us to see patterns?
For sure, there's a very definition of coincidence when it comes to these matters. So Magna Osman, she was a experimental psychologist at the University of London. She says that there's valuable sources of information, but unfortunately what happens is that when it comes to recognizing a pattern of coincidence, we ascribe meaning to it. So when we see these things, we want there to be providing, whether it be solace, whether it be clarification, whether it's an unusual configuration. Statistically, we want to put these things together, but there is chance. There is matters that are, Mother Nature taking its own actions in regards to the Mediterranean. There's a chance that in the UK, a gentleman was hit. Just happens to be they have a connection, and we are ascribing, we are putting that upon that situation. We are saying, a tech mogul, a lawyer, a banker, Mother Nature won here. And we want Mother Nature to be the one who controlled them, rather than some kind of nefarious force, whether it be aliens or whether it be, secret governments or Bilderberg Group or whatever, whoever we don't want to play as the naughty person here, as the bad person against these people. We have to be very careful and say, what? Actually, what is the statistical probability that, these things can happen? But we have to be very careful as ascribing, the blame on that.
You mentioned the Bilderberg Group. I put it to you, you're working for the Bilderberg Group. This is a double bluff, Kirsten. This is a double bluff. If you get run over by a cyclist now, well, no, it's true. Fascinating, far too little time. How can people find out more about what ASSAP does? Where can they go? I'll certainly be joining, by the way. I find this fascinating. Okay,
so the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena, you can find it at assap.ac.uk. Of course, it's an accredited charity from a scientific perspective. Also, check out the Facebook page is really active. There's lots of discussions on there, and also on a Thursday they hold an hour-long webinar presentation that happens on a Thursday every week, and that also goes out onto YouTube and Rumble, the BitChute, and so on. It's very popular, so feel free to follow us on there. And again, different hat on today, so I'm actually very glad to be here.
The truth is out there, and you're trying to find it. Really, really interesting. Thanks very much indeed, Kristen there from ASSAP Strongly recommended. I've had some dealings many years ago with that organization. Really interesting. So we haven't solved the mystery, but we've got some ideas about the methodology that will get us down the right path. If we'd had more time, I'd have asked him what ASSAP thinks about claims on the environment. We haven't got time for that today. Coming up next, though, we will go to the Middle East, troubled part of the world, but a bit boring at the moment. So it's not in the news so much. That's what the mainstream would have you believe. What's going on there? We've got Shane Healy, terrorism and youth justice expert, joining us in just a moment right here on TNT.
What do they want?
Exciting news.
Brace yourself.
TNT Radio News.
Matt Boyland here with a look at your TNT headlines. Speculation swirling that independent US presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will drop out of the race and endorse Donald Trump. Chaos erupted on the streets of Chicago during the second night of the Democratic National Convention as far-left extremists tried shutting the event down. And Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky's lashed out at the West, demanding it supply long-range weapons to Kyiv without fear of Russia's reaction.
Want to be a part of the conversation? Then let us know on the TNT Radio Interactive Live Chat Room, lighting the fuse for freedom.